Brandon Avery didn't expect his Thursday night to end with a woman in a red dress grabbing his arm and whispering, "Please pretend you know me." He blinked, standing outside the cheap Italian restaurant where he'd just picked up a pizza for his daughter. The woman's eyes were wide, pleading. She looked expensive, like she didn't belong anywhere near this part of town. Her lipstick was perfect, her heels too high for the cracked sidewalk, and she was clearly desperate. "Play along," she begged, glancing over her shoulder. Brandon didn't ask questions. He stepped forward, wrapped an arm around her waist like it was the most natural thing in the world, and said, "There you are, babe. I was starting to think you ditched me." She let out a shaky breath, clinging to his shirt. Behind her, a man in a suit stormed out of the restaurant, looking furious. "Penelope," the man barked. "What the hell are you doing?" Brandon kept his grip firm. "She's with me, maybe back off." The man looked him up and down with disgust. Brandon knew what he saw: faded jeans, work boots, a t-shirt with grease stains from the garage. A poor guy playing knight in shining armor. The man scoffed. "She's making a mistake." "Yeah," Penelope said, her voice cold now. "I did, letting you take me out." The man muttered something under his breath and stormed off. Penelope didn't move until he was gone completely. Brandon slowly let go of her waist. "You okay?" She looked up, her face softening. "I am now, thank you." He nodded, still holding the pizza box in one hand. "You, want to tell me what that was about?" She laughed, then immediately covered her mouth like she wasn't used to laughing in public. "Blind date. My assistant set it up. Guy turned out to be a controlling jerk. I was looking for an exit when I saw you." "Well, glad I could help," he said, shifting the box. "I've got to get this home. My daughter's waiting," her eyebrows lifted. "You have a daughter?" "Yeah, 8, Emmy." "She's the boss." Penelope smiled, real this time. "You're a dad. That explains why you didn't hesitate for a second." He shrugged. "Wouldn't want my kid in trouble. Figured somebody's gotta step in." She looked at him for a long second. Penelope Brooks, Brandon Avery, they shook hands. Hers were soft and cold, his were calloused and warm. "Can I at least buy you dinner?" she asked. "For saving me," he chuckled. "This is dinner, but thanks." She tilted her head. "Seriously, one dinner, real one, not a greasy pizza pickup." He hesitated. "Look, I don't really do fancy dinners. And I've got to get Emmy to school in the morning, so." She pulled out a sleek black wallet from her bag and handed him a card. "In case you change your mind." He took it reluctantly. Just a name, Penelope Brooks, and a number. No job title, no company name, just clean, white cardstock. "Thanks," he said, stuffing it in his back pocket. She gave a little wave and walked away, heels clicking against the pavement. Brandon watched her until she turned the corner and disappeared. The next morning, Emmy was sitting at the tiny dining table, hair messy, feet swinging under the chair. "Daddy, who's the lady on your card?" Brandon froze with his coffee halfway to his lips. "What?" "The card in your jeans." "I saw it when I did laundry." He sighed, pulling it out and tossing it on the table. "Just someone I helped yesterday, not important." "She's pretty," Emmy said through a mouthful of cereal. Brandon chuckled. "Yeah, she is." Emmy squinted at him. "Are you gonna marry her?" He nearly choked. "No, definitely not." "Why not?" "Because I don't even know her." "But she gave you her number. That means she likes you." Brandon shook his head. "Eat your cereal." By the time Friday rolled around, Brandon still hadn't called. But when he walked into the garage that morning, his boss was pacing with a phone to his ear. "Bran, you're free today, right?" Brandon raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Some luxury car broke down in Midtown. Client wants someone to come fix it on site. Big account, rich lady, real picky." "You're the only one who won't flirt with her." Brandon narrowed his eyes. "What kind of car?" "Bentley. Address is in the system. Go now." He grabbed the tools and headed out. Midtown felt like another world. Glassy buildings, doormen, everyone dressed like they just walked off a runway. He pulled up to the valet stand and gave the name. The guy pointed him toward the underground garage. He didn't expect to find her standing next to the car. Penelope turned, surprised. "You!" Brandon stopped in his tracks. "You're the Bentley," she laughed. Technically, it's mine. But yes. He shook his head, grinning. What are the odds? Apparently higher than I thought. He crouched by the front tire, popping the hood open. You didn't mention you were rich. You didn't ask. He glanced at her through the hood. So what do you do? She paused. I'm the CEO of Brooks and Bell. He stood straight. Wait, the tech company, the one with all the smart home stuff. That's the one, he blinked. You're the Penelope Brooks. Still me, she said, a little shy now. Brandon rubbed the back of his neck. You're worth, like, millions. She shrugged. Numbers are numbers. You helped me when you had no idea who I was. That matters more. He looked at her a long second. You still offering that dinner? Only if you let me take you somewhere that doesn't serve food in a box. He smiled. Deal. That night, she picked him up in her car. Emmy stayed with Brandon's neighbor, Miss Carla, who had watched her since she was a toddler. Penelope took him to a rooftop restaurant with white tablecloths and candles. The view of the city was unreal. I feel underdressed, Brandon muttered. You're perfect, she said, eyes soft. They ordered steak and wine. She asked about his daughter, his work, his life. He asked about hers, her rise, her company, her loneliness. I don't really date, she admitted. Men treat me like a trophy or a challenge. You didn't, he shrugged. I just saw someone who needed help. I haven't stopped thinking about you, she said quietly. He looked up. Yeah, me neither. They walked along the rooftop after, her hand brushing his. You're not like anyone I've ever met, she whispered. He looked down at her. That's funny. I was just thinking the same thing about you. And then, without overthinking it, he kissed her under the stars. The next morning, Brandon found himself staring at the tie hanging untouched on the back of his closet door. It had been 5 years since he'd worn it last time was his cousin's wedding, and even then, Emmy had gotten applesauce on it before the vows were finished. He picked it up, then shook his head and dropped it again. He wasn't going to start pretending to be someone else just because a woman like Penelope had kissed him under the stars. Are we doing pancakes or cereal today? Emmy asked, pulling her hair into one of her lopsided ponytails. Pancakes, he said, flipping on the stove. You've earned it. You nailed your spelling test. She grinned. Are pancakes a reward, or are you just in a good mood because you got kissed? He pointed the spatula at her. Watch it. Emmy giggled and leaned on the counter. Is she gonna come over? I don't know, he said honestly. She's got a lot on her plate. But she likes you, right? He cracked an egg into the bowl. I think so. Emmy tilted her head. That's good. You don't get nervous with her. You get quiet, but not weird quiet, just thinking quiet. Brandon gave her a sideways glance. You've been spying on my emotions. I'm observant, she said proudly. Later that day, while Emmy was at school and he was elbow-deep in a transmission that refused to cooperate, Brandon heard the crunch of heels on the concrete outside the garage. Not the usual kind, either. These were deliberate and smooth, not the click-clack of a customer pacing impatiently. He ducked out from under the vehicle and wiped his hands on a rag. Penelope stood there, wearing a navy coat that hit just above her knees and sunglasses that made her look like she'd stepped out of a magazine. You tracked me down, he asked, tossing the rag onto the workbench. I called your boss, she said. Told him I had another Bentley emergency. He raised an eyebrow. You don't own 2 Bentleys. No, she said, pulling off her sunglasses, but I did want to see you again. Brandon leaned against the metal cabinet behind him. You could have just said that. I thought about it, she admitted, but I figured this would be more fun. He chuckled under his breath. You really don't like doing things the easy way, do you? I run a company with over 800 employees. I don't remember the last time I did anything easy. And showing up at a grease-stained garage with flawless hair counts as hard, she stepped closer, her voice quieter. Facing someone who makes me feel seen, that's terrifying, he blinked. You don't seem like the terrified type. You'd be amazed what I can hide, she said, her gaze steady. He pulled the edge of the rag through his fingers. You hungry? I could be. There's a diner a few blocks away. They've got the best grilled cheese in the city, but don't tell anyone or the lines'll get worse. She smiled. Lead the way. They walked, her heels slower this time, not hurried, not trying to prove anything. The diner was narrow and old, with red booths and chipped counters. The waitress knew Brandon by name and brought coffee without asking. "Do you always eat here?" Penelope asked, scanning the menu. "Only when I want to feel like I'm 10 again. My dad used to bring me here when he had to work late and didn't want to leave me alone." Her expression softened. "What happened to him? Cancer. Took him fast." He shrugged. "Taught me a lot before he went, though." She didn't speak for a beat. "Then my mom left when I was 9, packed a suitcase and never came back." He looked up sharply. "Just like that." She said she wasn't made for the kind of life my dad wanted. He was all structure and expectations. She was chaos wrapped in perfume. "And your dad died of a heart attack when I was 21. I was already running the company by then." "You didn't have to." "I did," she said. "No one else could." They ate in silence for a moment. Then she said, "I've been thinking about bringing someone onto the Brooks and Bell board. Someone who understands people, not just numbers." He set down his sandwich. "Why are you telling me that?" "Because I think you understand people better than anyone I've ever met." "I fix cars, Penelope. You listen, you notice things, you don't talk to fill the silence." "That's rare." He searched her face. "You want me to join your board?" "No," she said. "I want you to consider what your life could be if you stopped assuming you belong in the background." He leaned back. "That's a lot to chew." "Good thing we've got grilled cheese for that." She paid the bill before he could reach for his wallet, sliding a black card across the counter like she'd done it 100 times, and she probably had. He didn't protest. Not because of pride, but because she didn't do it to show off. She just did it. Back outside, she paused on the sidewalk as a breeze kicked up. "I know this isn't your world," she said, "and I'm not asking you to change who you are. But I'm inviting you into mine." He watched her for a long moment. "I don't want to be a project." "You're not," she said. "You're a person I haven't stopped thinking about since you touched my waist like you were protecting something valuable." He exhaled. "What do you want from me?" "Dinner." "Again, this time at my place, I'll cook." He raised an eyebrow. "You cook. You'll see." She turned and walked away, not looking back. That night, Brandon paced his living room while Emmy colored on the floor. "You're nervous," she said without looking up. "I'm not." "You are. You keep checking the clock and your hair." He sat beside her. "She invited me to dinner." Emmy glanced up. "Are you gonna wear your button shirt?" "I was thinking about it," she smiled. "She's lucky. You're the best cook in this house," he laughed. "That's not saying much, kiddo." Brandon dropped her off at Carla's again, then headed across town. Penelope's building had a private elevator and a lobby that smelled like fresh orchids. Her apartment was on the top floor. When the doors opened, she was waiting barefoot in a soft sweater and jeans, holding a wooden spoon. "I burned toast," she declared, "just so we're clear." He stepped inside. "What's for dinner?" "Takeout, but I plated it myself," he laughed, stepping closer. "That counts." They ate on her balcony, lights of the city blinking around them. She poured wine, asked about Emmy's favorite books, told him about her first failed pitch meeting at 20 years old. By the time they were sitting on the couch, her feet tucked under her, his hand resting on her knee, Brandon realized something he never expected. He felt calm. She turned to him, eyes serious. "I don't need saving. But I've spent a long time building walls that no one tried to climb." He brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "I don't climb walls, I knock." "Then come in," she whispered. He kissed her again, this time slower, deeper, with the quiet understanding of two people who'd spent years surviving and were finally ready to live. "Do you always cook barefoot?" Brandon asked, leaning his shoulder against the doorframe of Penelope's kitchen the next morning. She looked over her shoulder, flipping something in a pan. "Only when I'm trying to impress someone who fixes luxury cars better than I make scrambled eggs." He chuckled. "Well, I'm impressed. You didn't even set off the smoke alarm this time." "That's because I didn't turn the oven on." "We're having fruit and toast." "You're evolving." Penelope looked different in the daylight. Softer, quieter, but not in a diminished way. There was something in the way she moved around her kitchen that made Brandon feel like he wasn't just visiting her world anymore, like she'd made room for him in it. "I have an event tonight," she said, placing a plate on the counter. "I was going to cancel, but I thought maybe you'd come with me." He blinked. "You want me to go to one of those black tie things?" "It's not black tie," she said quickly. "Business formal suits, no tuxedos." He looked down at his t-shirt. "I don't own anything with a collar that isn't oil-stained. I've already arranged for a tailor. They'll come to you." Brandon stared at her. Penelope set her fork down. "I didn't mean that to sound controlling. I want you there. Not because I need a date, but because I want people to see who I'm building a life with." He exhaled slowly. "What kind of event is it?" "Investor dinner. A few board members, press." "It's the kind of night where you shake hands until your face hurts and pretend the wine is good." "You sure I won't embarrass you?" She reached across the counter and took his hand. "Brandon, you're the only person in my life who has nothing to gain from impressing me." "That's exactly why I want you there." He looked at her fingers wrapped around his. "All right, but if anyone tries to talk to me about hedge funds, I'm leaving." That afternoon, the tailor arrived at Brandon's apartment. Emmy watched with wide eyes as bolts of fabric were held against her father's shoulders and measurements were taken with swift, practiced movements. "Do I get a dress too?" she asked. Brandon laughed. "Not tonight, Peanut. You've got school in the morning. But if you're going out, I should get something sparkly." "No sparkles. You're staying with Miss Carla." Emmy pouted but nodded. "Will she let me have ice cream?" "She always does." By the time the sun dipped below the city skyline, Brandon was standing in front of Penelope's building in a tailored navy suit that made him feel like he'd stepped out of someone else's life. When the elevator doors opened, Penelope was waiting in a slate gray dress that fit her like it had been made just for her. Her hair was pinned up, delicate earrings catching the light. "You clean up well," she said, eyes trailing over him. "You look like you command empires." Penelope smiled but didn't deflect. "I do, but not tonight." The car waiting downstairs was sleek and silent. Brandon had never ridden in anything that didn't rattle with every pothole. At the venue, a valet opened the door for him before he could touch the handle. Inside, the room glittered with chandeliers and polished conversation. Penelope introduced him without hesitation. "This is Brandon Avery," she said to a small group of sharply dressed men and women. "He's the most grounded person I've ever met." They nodded politely, some with confusion. One woman frowned slightly. "And what do you do, Mr. Avery?" she asked. Brandon met her gaze. "I run a garage in Brooklyn." There was a pause. Then the woman tilted her head. "How refreshing." Penelope took his hand under the table during dinner. She didn't let go. Later, as music swelled and people drifted toward the floor, one of the board members approached Penelope. "Brooks, I didn't know you had a type," he said, sipping his champagne. "Apparently I do," she replied, not looking away from Brandon. The man chuckled and wandered off. Brandon leaned in. "You all right?" "I'm used to being watched," she said, "but I'm not used to being seen." He glanced around the room. "They're going to talk. Let them." A few hours later, after the last toast had been given and the last handshake exchanged, they stepped back out into the quiet of the night. "Thank you for coming with me," she said. "I know that wasn't your scene." "You didn't flinch once," he said. "Not when they looked at me like I was your charity case." "I don't care what they think." He studied her face. "Then why do I feel like you're holding your breath?" Penelope hesitated. "Because I'm not used to letting people this close. Especially not when it matters." "Is that what this is?" he asked. "It matters," she nodded. "I wasn't lying when I said you made me feel seen, but it's more than that now. You make me feel safe, and I never expected that to feel so terrifying." He stepped closer. "That goes both ways, Pen. I've been doing everything myself so long, I forgot what it felt like to lean on someone. Then maybe we try something new together." He kissed her there, on the sidewalk, beneath the glowing city skyline. Not for show, not for escape, just because he couldn't not. When Penelope pulled back, her voice was quiet. "Come home with me." Brandon hesitated. "Emmy, stay the night. Not forever, just tonight," he nodded. "One night." But as they walked back to her building, side by side, her fingers brushing his, the truth settled quietly between them. One night was only the beginning. Brandon stood frozen in the hallway outside Penelope's penthouse, his jacket slung over his shoulder, the morning sun bleeding gold through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She was curled on the couch, barefoot again, one hand wrapped around a mug of coffee. He couldn't stop staring. Not because she looked effortless in her silence, but because, for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. "You're thinking too loud," she said without looking up. He stepped inside, dropping his jacket on the arm of the couch. "I don't think this is a one-night thing." She set her mug down. "Neither do I. I'm not used to things moving this fast. You're not the only one." He sat beside her. "It's not just about us now." "It's about Emmy, too," Penelope nodded. "Then I want to meet her, not be introduced. I want to know her." Brandon studied her. "She's not like other kids. She picks up on things adults miss. If she senses something's off, she'll shut down." "Then I'll be honest," she said. "With both of you." He reached out, brushing his thumb along her wrist. "You don't have to be perfect. I'm not trying to be. I just want to be real." Later that afternoon, Penelope stood on the front steps of Brandon's building, holding a bouquet of wildflowers with stems slightly too long for the paper wrapping. Her driver offered to help, but she waved him off. This moment had to be hers. When Brandon opened the door, Emmy peeked from behind his leg, clutching a worn sketch pad. Penelope crouched. "Hi, I'm Penelope. These are for you." Emmy eyed the bouquet. "They're messy." Penelope smiled. "I thought they looked happier that way." Emmy took the flowers, sniffed them, and nodded. "They smell like the park after it rains." Brandon leaned against the doorframe. "She's got your number already." Penelope tilted her head. "Can I come in?" Emmy stepped aside. "You can if you like cartoons." Inside, the apartment was smaller than anything Penelope had been in since college, but it was filled with warmth. Crayon drawings lined one wall. A bookshelf leaned under the weight of dog-eared paperbacks. The scent of grilled cheese and tomato soup hung in the air. "She's been drawing dresses lately," Brandon said, nodding toward the sketch pad. "Told me yesterday she wants to be a designer." Penelope lowered herself beside Emmy on the floor. "Can I see?" Emmy flipped to a page filled with bold lines and swirling colors. "This one's for a princess who doesn't like pink." Penelope studied it. "That takes guts. She fights trolls. Then she definitely needs something fierce, maybe boots." Emmy's eyes narrowed. "You get it." Brandon watched as his daughter handed over the sketch pad, letting Penelope trace the outlines with her finger. It was the kind of trust that couldn't be forced. After dinner, Penelope helped Emmy string paper stars from the ceiling. Brandon caught her glancing at the peeling paint on the walls, but she didn't say a word. She never once looked out of place, just present. Grounded. There, when Emmy yawned, Penelope tucked the girl's blanket up to her chin and whispered something Brandon couldn't hear. Emmy nodded solemnly, then closed her eyes. "She asked if I'd come back," Penelope said softly, following Brandon into the kitchen. He wiped his hands on a towel. "And I said only if she wanted me to." He leaned against the counter. "I don't think she's the only one." Penelope stepped closer. "There's something I haven't told you." Brandon's jaw tensed. "What is it?" "I'm supposed to leave next week, Paris. A 3-month expansion deal. It's been in motion for over a year." His stomach sank. "And when were you going to tell me?" "I didn't expect to meet you. Any of this. But I'm not walking away from something real just because my calendar says I should be in another country." He crossed his arms. "So what now? I'm not asking you to follow me. And I'm not giving up everything I built, but I'm willing to do something I've never done before. Restructure the deal. Move it back. Limit my travel." He looked her in the eye. "You do all that?" "Yes," she said. "Because I finally have something that matters more than my next acquisition." Silence stretched between them. Then he said, "You don't have to do it all alone anymore." The next week was a blur of movement. Penelope invited Emmy and Brandon to the Brooks and Bell headquarters on a Sunday when the office was closed. The little girl walked the glass halls like they were a museum, stopping at every display, asking questions about the smart devices and their tiny blinking lights. In the conference room, Penelope set up a miniature workstation for Emmy, complete with colored pencils and a whiteboard. "You're officially our youngest creative consultant," she said, handing her a visitor badge. Brandon watched from behind the glass, arms folded across his chest, his mouth twitching. "You just hired my daughter. She's got a better eye for design than half my team. You're not going to let go of us, are you?" "No," she said. "I'm going to hold on, even when it's hard." That night, Brandon took her to the roof of his building where they'd strung Christmas lights across old pipes and brought up 2 chairs and a blanket. It wasn't a penthouse view, but the stars still looked close enough to touch. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I used to think love was a distraction. And now I think it's the only thing that makes any of the rest of it worth it." He turned to her. "You still sure about the Paris deal?" "I am, but I'm not going alone. I've arranged to fly back twice a month. I'll set up a satellite office here. You and Emmy will have a say in where we go next." He took her hand. "You're not afraid?" "I am," she said. "But I trust you." 2 months later, Penelope stood at a podium inside a sprawling gala ballroom, reporters flashing photos as she announced the company's international expansion. She wore a structured navy dress and a silver pendant that Emmy had picked out from a thrift shop. Brandon stood near the back, Emmy on his hip, both of them dressed in outfits Penelope had had tailored for them. He didn't feel like an outsider anymore. He felt like her anchor just as she had become his. When she finished her speech, she walked straight to them, unbothered by the cameras, and pressed a kiss to Emmy's forehead, then to Brandon's mouth. "Are you ready to go home?" she asked softly. He nodded. "Yeah." "Let's go home." And together, they stepped back into the night not as a CEO and a mechanic, not as a billionaire and a single father, but as 2 people who had found something rare in each other, something they never planned for but would never let go. Brandon adjusted the lapel of his blazer with a low sigh as the museum doors opened ahead of him. He wasn't used to this, being escorted through hushed marble halls by a gallery director, while Penelope walked beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm like it belonged there. Like he belonged here. "This is my first time in a place like this without a school field trip chaperone badge," he muttered under his breath. Penelope leaned in. "Then consider tonight your reintroduction to the finer things." He glanced at her. "You mean overpriced sculpture and people who pretend to understand abstract art?" "No," she said. "I mean champagne in crystal flutes and stolen kisses near $1,000,000 paintings." He stopped walking. "That second part sounds more interesting." "I thought it might." They continued through the exhibit until they reached a velvet roped alcove. Inside, a new installation gleamed under soft lighting, a childhood initiative Penelope's company had quietly funded for underserved school districts. The plaque bore her name, but she didn't mention it. She just looked ahead, her expression unreadable. Brandon watched her. "Why didn't you tell me about this?" "Because it's not about me," she said. "It's about kids like Emmy who are smart and creative and deserve more than the system offers." He reached for her hand. "You're building something bigger than a tech empire." "I'm trying," she said. "And I want you both to be part of it. You already made us part of it." Penelope turned toward him, her voice softer. "I used to think legacy was about scale. Now I think it's about who you share it with." Later that night, they returned to her penthouse, where Emmy was asleep in the guest room, wrapped in a blanket with her favorite comic book beside her. Penelope closed the door quietly, then turned to find Brandon watching her. He stepped forward. "There's something I want to ask you." She tilted her head. "Is this the part where you tell me you're opening your own garage?" "I already did that," he said. "Lease went through yesterday, small space on the west side, more foot traffic, better hours." Her eyes widened with delight. "Brandon, that's incredible." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a slim velvet box. But that's not what I was talking about. She froze. He opened it slowly, revealing a ring elegant, understated, with a single round diamond set in a platinum band. Her breath caught. "I don't have a yacht," he said, "or a private chateau in Italy, but I have a daughter who already adores you, a life I built with my own hands, and a heart that's been yours since the second you asked me to pretend I knew you." Penelope's eyes filled, her throat tightening. "You didn't ask for any of this." "I didn't need to," he said. "It found me, you found me." She looked down at the ring, then back at him. "I've had boardrooms full of people applaud my success, but you're the only person who made me feel like I didn't have to earn love." He held her gaze. "So is that a yes?" she breathed out. "That's an absolutely." Brandon slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her with a quiet certainty that felt like the final piece clicking into place. 3 months later, they stood under a blooming archway in a sun-drenched garden just outside the city. The ceremony was intentionally small, 30 people, tops. Emmy walked ahead of Penelope, tossing petals with theatrical flair while wearing a silver dress she designed herself. Brandon stood at the altar, his eyes never leaving Penelope as she walked toward him in a simple ivory gown, her hair down, her smile brighter than the sky. The vows weren't long or elaborate, just promises spoken with conviction. Promises to choose each other every day, to make room for laughter, even in hard moments, and to never let the world outside their door steal what they'd built inside it. Afterward, they danced under string lights while Emmy twirled between them, giggling when Brandon spun her too fast, and Penelope caught her before she fell. "You're not going to believe this," Penelope whispered into Brandon's ear as the music swelled around them, "but I canceled 2 international meetings next month." He pulled back, surprised. "Seriously?" she nodded. "Turns out I'd rather be here for Emmy's science fair and your shop's opening party than shaking hands in Berlin." He grinned. "You'll regret missing the catered hors d'oeuvres. I'd rather have your pancakes." They kissed again, slow and unhurried, the way people kiss when there's no doubt left in them. That fall, Penelope and Emmy launched a weekend design workshop at the community center. Brandon's new garage took off faster than expected, thanks to Penelope's quiet investment and his reputation for honesty. Every Saturday, they made breakfast together, Emmy at the stove, Brandon flipping pancakes, Penelope sipping coffee and sketching ideas for their next family trip. They didn't live in her penthouse anymore. They'd bought a townhouse with a garden Emmy could plant sunflowers in, with a cozy kitchen where Penelope learned how to make waffles without burning them, and a garage out back where Brandon sometimes worked late with the door open just so he could hear them laughing inside. One evening, years later, Penelope stood in that same kitchen, now filled with signs of a life, fully lived drawings on the fridge, a dog sleeping by the door, a worn cookbook open to a page Emmy had scribbled on. Brandon came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. "She's asleep already?" he asked. "Out cold," she said, leaning into him. "She's got her first design internship tomorrow." "She's not 8 anymore," he said. "No," she whispered, "but she'll always be our beginning." He kissed her neck and she smiled, her ring glinting under the soft light. In that moment, there was nothing left unsettled. No doubts, no mischances, just a woman who had once built walls around her heart, a man who had lived quietly in the shadows, and a little girl who taught them both how to let love in. And together, they lived every single day like it was the one that changed everything.